The sun was a hammer that never stopped swinging. It beat down upon the broken spine of the Arizona Territory, turning the red rock mesas into anvils that radiated heat so fierce it bent the air itself. Nothing moved in that vast, shimmering distance, except the heat haze dancing like restless spirits over the alkali flats. Now, before I tell you this story, I want you to know something. This is a tale about a man who did terrible things, a man who drew lines on paper that led soldiers to places they never should have gone. But it is also a story about what happens when a broken soul finds a reason to put itself back together. So if you have ever wondered whether a person can truly change, whether the weight of the past can ever be lifted, then settle in, because this story is going to answer that question in ways you might not expect. Elias Carter pulled the brim of his hat lower, squinting against the glare. The dust coating his face was thick enough to crack when he frowned. He rode a roan mare that had seen better years. Her coat dull with sweat and grit, her head hanging low as she picked her way through a tangle of thorny mesquite and cholla cactus. The leather of his saddle creaked with each step, a dry, rhythmic protest that was the only sound in the dead silence of the canyon. Elias was a man built of hard angles and scar tissue, 32 years old but carrying the weight of 50 in the lines around his eyes. He wore a faded calico shirt that had once been blue, now stained the color of the earth, and canvas trousers tucked into worn boots. A Winchester rifle sat in the scabbard under his leg, the wood stock smooth from years of handling. He was alone, as he had been for the better part of 5 years. Elias preferred the silence. It was cleaner than the noise of towns, safer than the crowded saloons where men drank to forget what they had done or what they intended to do. Here, in the borderlands, the only judgment came from survival. If you found water, you lived. If your horse stepped in a gopher hole, you died. It was a simple, brutal mathematics that Elias understood down to his bones. He was tracking a mule that had wandered off from his cabin 2 days prior, a stubborn animal that represented a good portion of everything he owned. His cabin sat miles back, a rough structure of pine logs and mud chinking perched near a creek that was slowly dying in the drought. It was a lonely place that smelled of gun oil and stale coffee, but it was his. It was the place he had chosen to hide from the world, and more importantly, from himself. As the mare stepped over a jagged ridge of limestone, Elias paused. His gaze drifted toward the distant mountains that rose like broken teeth against the horizon. A familiar cold sickness coiled in his gut. Those mountains held memories he had tried to drown in cheap whiskey and silence. He remembered the smell of burning wickiups. That scent never left you. It was different from a wood fire, greasier, heavier. He remembered the sound of the cavalry bugle cutting through the dawn, the thunder of hooves, and the terrible high-pitched screaming of women and children running for cover that did not exist. Elias had been a scout then, young and foolish, believing the lies about pacification and safety. He had ridden ahead, finding the trails, leading the blue coats to hidden valleys. He had told himself he was doing a job. He had told himself it was war. But war was supposed to be men fighting men. What he had seen, what he had helped make happen, was something else entirely. Elias shook his head hard, scattering the memory like a persistent fly. He nudged the mare forward with his heels. He had walked away from the army 5 years ago, left his pay and his reputation in the dirt, but the ghosts rode with him every single day. They sat behind him on the saddle. They whispered in his ear when he tried to sleep. They asked him questions he could not answer. The trail he was following dipped into a narrow, rocky wash. a scar in the earth where water flooded violently once a year and left dry bones the rest of the time. The silence here was deeper, magnified by the canyon walls pressing in on both sides. Then he heard it. It was not the bray of his lost mule. It was a sound entirely out of place in this desolation. A sharp human gasp followed by the scrabble of boots against loose shale. Elias reined in the mare instantly. His hand went to the colt on his hip, a reflex honed by a decade of living where life came cheap. He sat motionless, listening. The wind hissed through the dry brush. He heard it again, a low moan laced with pain. Someone was out there. Someone was hurt. And Elias Carter, the man who had spent 5 years running from what he had done, was about to discover that sometimes the universe puts a person exactly where they need to be, even when they do not want to be there at all. Elias dismounted quietly, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He tied the mare to a sturdy creosote bush and moved forward, crouching low with his eyes scanning the shadows of the wash. His hand never left the grip of his pistol. He rounded a large boulder, red as dried blood, and stopped dead in his tracks. A woman lay on the ground, curled on her side in the dirt. She was young, maybe 20 years old, with long black hair that had come loose and tangled with twigs and debris. She wore a dress of buckskin stained with dust and hard travel, and moccasins that were worn clean through at the toes. She was Apache. The realization hit Elias with a jolt of adrenaline that nearly stopped his heart. To find an Apache woman alone this far from the reservations or the mountain strongholds was rare, and it usually meant trouble was following close behind. He took one careful step forward. The woman's body snapped rigid like a coiled spring, releasing. She rolled onto her back, her eyes flying open. They were dark as creek water at midnight, fever bright, and filled with a ferocity that stopped Elias where he stood. In her right hand she gripped a knife. It was a rusted, dull blade that had seen better days, but she held it like she knew exactly how to use it. Her hand trembled something awful, but the point was aimed straight at his chest. "Stay back," she rasped. Her voice was dry and cracking like old parchment. She spoke in her own tongue first, then switched to broken English. "White soldier, stay back." Elias raised both hands slowly, palms open where she could see them. "I am not a soldier," he said, keeping his voice low and steady, the way a man speaks to a spooked horse. "I am just a man looking for a lost mule." "Liar," she spat. Her eyes darted frantically, searching the canyon behind him for the others she was certain were coming. Elias looked at her more closely now. Her skin was ashen beneath the dust. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the dry heat. Something was very wrong with her beyond simple exhaustion. Then he saw her leg. Her left calf was exposed where her skirt had ridden up. It was swollen to nearly twice its normal size. The skin stretched tight and shiny, mottled with angry purple and black bruising that spread up toward her knee. 2 distinct puncture wounds, weeping dark fluid, marked the flesh just above her ankle. "Rattlesnake," Elias said quietly. The word hung heavy in the air between them. The woman let out a shuddering breath. Her arm wavered and the knife dipped toward the ground. She tried to push herself up, tried to crawl away from him, but the movement sent a spasm of agony through her body. She cried out, a raw sound of pain and defeat, and collapsed back into the dirt. Elias looked up at the sky. It was past noon. The bite looked hours old already. The poison was working its way through her blood, cooking her from the inside out. If he left her here, she would be dead before sundown. The coyotes would find her tonight. He looked at the knife she still clutched in her trembling fingers. He looked at the fierce hatred in her eyes, a hatred born of the same history that haunted his own nightmares. If he touched her and her people found out, they would likely kill him before he could speak a single word in his own defense. To the Apache, a white man bending over a helpless woman meant only one thing. But then she looked at him again. Her vision was clearly blurring, her eyes rolling slightly. But she blinked hard, fighting to keep him in focus, fighting to stay alive for one more second, one more breath. It was a stubborn, defiant will to survive that Elias recognized immediately. It was the same thing that had kept him breathing after he walked away from everything he knew. He cursed softly under his breath. He could not leave her. "I am going to help you," Elias said, stepping closer. "No," she moaned. She slashed the knife at the air between them. It was a weak, clumsy strike, barely more than a gesture. Elias moved fast. He caught her wrist, his grip firm but careful not to hurt her. She thrashed against him, weak as a kitten, trying to bite his arm. But he twisted her wrist gently until her fingers opened, and the knife fell into the dust. He kicked it away. "Be still," he ordered. "You have snake poison in you. If you keep fighting, your heart pumps it faster through your whole body. Do you want to die here in this wash?" The woman stared at him. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths. The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once, replaced by a terrifying, glassy vacancy in her eyes. She slumped against the ground. Elias knelt beside her. He pulled a bandana from his pocket and uncorked his canteen, wetting the cloth with the precious water. He wiped the dirt from around the wound as gently as he could manage. She flinched. A hiss escaped through her clenched teeth, but she did not pull away. Elias drew his own knife from his belt, a sharp bowie with a bone handle that his father had given him years ago. Her eyes widened with terror, fixing on the blade. "I have to cut it," Elias said, meeting her gaze directly. "I have to get the poison out. It is the only way." He did not wait for permission. He grasped her calf, his hand large and rough against her fevered skin. He made 2 quick, precise incisions over the puncture marks in the shape of a cross. Dark blood welled up instantly. The woman screamed, a sharp, jagged sound that echoed off the canyon walls and sent birds scattering from the brush. Her head fell back and her body arched with agony. Elias did not hesitate. He bent his head and pressed his mouth to the wound, sucking hard. He tasted the metallic copper of blood and the bitter taint of venom on his tongue. He spat onto the ground. He did it again and again. It was the old way, the only way he knew. After several minutes of this grim work, he sat back and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He cut a strip of leather from his belt and tied it tightly around her leg just below the knee to slow whatever poison remained. She was shaking now, violent tremors that made her teeth chatter together. Shock was setting in fast. Elias looked around the wash. There was no shelter here. The sun was killing her as surely as the snake had tried to. He had to get her somewhere safe. He had to get her to his cabin. Elias slid his arms beneath her, one under her knees and one behind her back. As he lifted her, he was struck by how light she was, hollowed out by hunger and hard living. Yet there was something solid about her, too, something that refused to break. Her head lolled against his shoulder. Her body radiated fever heat that soaked right through his shirt. For a moment, holding her like this, Elias felt something strange, a jarring intimacy he had not experienced in years. She smelled of sagebrush and wood smoke and the copper scent of blood. She smelled like the land itself. She groaned. Her hand gripped the front of his shirt, her knuckles turning white. She looked up at him, her eyes dark pools of confusion. "Blue coat," she whispered. the words slurred and thick on her tongue. "You burn villages." "I am not a blue coat," Elias said. His voice came out rough and broken. "I am just Elias. That is all I am now." He carried her to his horse, and somehow he got her settled in the saddle despite her dead weight. He mounted behind her, pulling her back against his chest so she would not fall. Her head rested against his shoulder in an awkward, desperate embrace. He could feel the rapid, fluttery beat of her heart against his ribs, like a trapped bird trying to escape. Elias spurred the mare forward. The ride back to his cabin would take hours. He did not know if she would survive that long. He did not know if saving her was the right thing to do or the most foolish mistake of his life. But as the canyon walls fell away behind them and the trail opened onto the vast burning expanse of the desert, Elias Carter realized something that surprised him. For the first time in 5 years, he actually cared whether he lived or died, because now there was someone else depending on him, and that changed everything. 3 days passed before the fever broke. Elias barely slept during that time. He sat on a wooden stool beside his narrow cot, watching the Apache woman fight for her life. He changed her bandages every few hours. He forced water mixed with willow bark between her cracked lips. He kept cool compresses on her forehead when she burned and piled blankets on her when she shook with chills. She muttered constantly in her delirium, words in her own language that flowed like water over stones. Sometimes she argued with people Elias could not see. Sometimes she cried out for her mother. Once she tried to claw at his face, convinced he was dragging her to some terrible prison camp. "Be easy," Elias murmured over and over. "You are safe here. I will not hurt you." On the morning of the 4th day, she opened her eyes. Elias was at the stove, stirring a pot of beans. He heard her sharp intake of breath and turned around. She was sitting up in the cot, pressed back against the log wall like a cornered animal. Her eyes were wild, darting around the small cabin, taking in the wooden beams of the ceiling, the stone fireplace, the saddle in the corner. Her hand groped at her belt, searching for the knife that was no longer there. "Where is it?" she demanded. Her voice was a dry croak. "Where is my knife?" Elias set down the wooden spoon. "Your knife is on the table," he said calmly, nodding toward it. "You can see it from where you are sitting." Her eyes found the blade. It sat in plain sight, too far for her to grab quickly. She looked back at him with naked suspicion. "You stole me," she accused. "You took me while I slept. My sisters will come for me. They will cut your heart out and feed it to the dogs." "I found you dying in a wash," Elias said. He kept his voice flat and even. "A rattlesnake bit you. Do you remember that at all?" She paused. Something flickered across her face. The memory returning in fragments. The buzzing sound in the rocks. The strike like a hot iron pressed to her leg. The white man finding her when she was too weak to run. "I remember," she said guardedly. "You should have let me die," she added. "Better to die free than be a prisoner of a white man." Elias turned back to the stove. He poured coffee into a tin cup and ladled beans into a wooden bowl. He walked toward the cot slowly, making sure she could see that his hands were full and posed no threat. He set the food on the stool within her reach, then backed away to the far side of the room. He pushed the cabin door wide open. Morning light flooded in, revealing the vast open land beyond. "Look," he said, gesturing outside. "No bars, no lock, no chains on your ankles. You are not a prisoner here. If you can walk, you can leave right now. But I will tell you plain, you will not make it a mile on that leg. Not yet. The woman looked at the open door. Freedom was right there, tantalizing and close. She looked down at her leg, wrapped neatly in clean white bandages. She tested her ankle, rotating it slightly. Pain shot up her shin, but it was bearable. The swelling had gone down considerably. She looked at the food. The smell of beans and bacon fat reached her nose, and her stomach cramped with desperate hunger. She had not eaten properly in days before the snake bite. She reached for the bowl and ate like a starving wolf, watching him over the rim the entire time. She drank the coffee so fast it scalded her throat. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "You move like a soldier," she said suddenly. Elias stiffened but did not turn around. He was staring out at the morning light on the mountains. "You know how to bandage wounds," she continued. "You have a repeating rifle. You ride an army saddle." "I bought the saddle," Elias said quietly. "You walk like one. You stand like one. Were you a blue coat?" Elias turned slowly to face her. For a moment she saw something terrible in his face, a profound, crushing weariness, the look of a man who had walked a very long road carrying a very heavy stone. "I was a scout," he said, "for the 3rd Cavalry, out of Fort Apache." The woman recoiled like he had slapped her across the face. Her lip curled with disgust. "A scout," she spat. "The eyes of the enemy. The betrayer who leads the wolves to the flock. I knew what you were the moment I saw you. You are a killer of women and children." "I was a scout," Elias repeated. His voice had gone hard as iron. "I tracked. I found water sources. I found trails through the mountains. But I also saw what the soldiers did. 5 years ago at Sibicu. I saw what they did to the winter camps there." He looked down at his boots, his jaw clenched tight. "And I took off my blue coat and I walked away. I have not touched the army since that day. I have not spoken to another soldier. I live out here alone because I cannot stand to look at what I helped create." He met her eyes. "I am sorry for what happened to your people. I am more sorry than you will ever know. I cannot change what I did, but I am not that man anymore. At least I am trying not to be." The woman stared at him. She wanted to hate him. It would be so much easier to hate him. But she saw the shame living inside him like a sickness. She had seen that same look before in the eyes of her own people who had done terrible things just to survive. "What is your name?" Elias asked. She hesitated. To share her name with a white man felt like giving him power over her, but he had saved her life. He had sucked poison from her blood. He had sat beside her bed for 3 days. "Nayland," she said finally. "My name is Nayland." "Nayland," Elias repeated. The name felt strange and beautiful on his tongue. "I am Elias Carter, and I promise you, on whatever honor I have left, I mean you no harm." Nayland steadied his face for a long moment. "I must return to my people," she said. "My sisters will think I am dead. They will be searching for me. And if they find me here with a white man, especially a scout, they will burn this cabin to the ground with you inside it." Elias nodded slowly. He understood. Apache justice was swift and absolute. "Where is your camp?" he asked. Nayland hesitated again. To reveal the location of her camp to a white man was the worst kind of betrayal. But she looked at her injured leg. She looked at the endless desert stretching beyond the cabin door. 2 days' ride, she said quietly. In the Dragoon Mountains, near the canyon they call Cottonwood. Elias pushed off from the door frame and reached for his hat. "Then I will take you there," he said. Nayland actually laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound without any humor in it. "You will be killed before we get within a mile of the camp." "Maybe," Elias said. He settled the hat on his head. "But I saved your life. I intend to see you keep it. That means getting you home safe." "And what do you want in return?" Nayland demanded. "White men always want something." Elias looked at her. His eyes were tired and sad, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like hope. "I want to sleep without nightmares," he said quietly. "I want to close my eyes and not see the faces of the dead. Maybe if I do one good thing, just one thing that actually matters, the ghosts will let me rest." He walked outside to prepare the horses. Nayland sat alone in the cabin, holding the empty coffee cup in her hands. She did not know what to make of this strange white man who spoke of ghosts and carried guilt like a physical weight on his shoulders. But she knew one thing for certain. Her sisters were going to kill him the moment they saw his face. The journey took 2 days through some of the harshest country the Arizona Territory had to offer. Elias had constructed a travois from 2 long poles and a blanket, lashing it to his mare so Nayland could travel without putting weight on her injured leg. The contraption bumped and scraped over rocks and roots, but it kept her moving. They did not speak much during that first day. The silence between them was thick with all the things neither of them could say. Elias rode ahead, scanning the horizon for trouble. Nayland lay on the travois, watching his back. She watched the way he sat in the saddle, straight and alert, but not rigid. She watched how his eyes never stopped moving, always checking the hills and the shadows. She watched him give her his water ration when the sun was at its peak, claiming he was not thirsty. On the second evening, they made camp in a dry arroyo to avoid being seen. No fire, just cold jerky and stale biscuits eaten in the dark. "Why do you stay?" Nayland asked suddenly. "You could have pointed me toward the mountains and ridden the other direction. My sisters would never have found you." Elias chewed his food slowly before answering. "I told you," he said, "I owe a debt. Not just to you, to everyone like you." Nayland shifted on her blanket, wincing as her leg protested the movement. "There was a man," she said quietly, "a scout. He led the soldiers to our winter camp when I was 12 years old. I hid in a storage pit while they burned everything. I heard my father die." Elias went very still. "I am sorry," he said. The words felt pathetically inadequate. "I grew up hating that scout," Nayland continued. "I never learned his name. But I promised myself that if I ever found him, I would cut his heart out." She looked at Elias in the fading light. "Are you that man?" she asked. Elias felt ice water flood his veins. The question hit him like a physical blow. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I was a scout for 3 years. I led soldiers to many camps. I did not keep count. I tried not to remember their faces." Nayland was silent for a long time. "Then perhaps you are," she said finally. "Or perhaps you are not. But you are trying to be something different now. I can see that much." She lay back on the blanket and closed her eyes. "We will see what my sisters think of your redemption," she murmured. "They are not as forgiving as I am." They reached the canyon the following afternoon. It appeared out of the wasteland like a miracle, a sudden slash of green cutting through the endless brown and red. Elias saw the cottonwood trees first, their leaves shimmering emerald against the rock walls. The scent of water reached him a moment later, cool and sweet and promising life. But another scent drifted on the breeze too, wood smoke. Nayland stirred on the travois, her eyes opened wide. "We are close," she said. Her voice carried both relief and warning. What happens next depends entirely on you. Keep your hands where they can see them. Do not touch your weapons, and do not speak unless spoken to. The canyon floor was narrow, hemmed in by towering walls of red stone. Wickiups dotted the banks of a thin stream. Horses grazed in a makeshift corral. Children played near the water. It looked peaceful, almost gentle. Then the warriors appeared. They rose from behind rocks and dropped from tree branches. They emerged from the brush with a terrifying silent grace. Within seconds, Elias was surrounded by a dozen men with painted faces and ready weapons. A hand grabbed his mare's bridle, jerking the animal to a stop. Strong arms seized Elias by the collar and belt, wrenching him from the saddle. He hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his lungs. A boot pressed between his shoulder blades, pinning him flat in the dust. He felt the cold bite of a knife blade against his throat. "Stay still!" A voice hissed in his ear, accented English thick with hatred. "Move and you die." Elias did not struggle. He lay with his cheek pressed to the earth, breathing in dust and waiting to see if the next few seconds would be his last. Then Nalen's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop," she cried out. "Do not kill him." The pressure of the knife did not ease. Elias felt a hand grip his hair, yanking his head back. He looked up into the face of a young warrior painted for war. The hatred in those eyes was pure enough to burn. "He is a white scout," the warrior snarled. "I know his kind. He rode with the bluecoats." "He saved me," Nalen shouted. She was struggling to push herself up on the travois, her face pale with exertion. "Look at my leg. A rattlesnake bit me 3 days ago. He cut the poison out. He brought me home. If he wanted to kill me, I would be buzzard food by now." The warrior with the knife looked from Nalen to Elias and back again. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "He is white," the warrior spat. "That is reason enough to kill him. Let him up." The new voice carried absolute authority. The circle of warriors parted. 2 women stepped forward. They were older than Nalen, their faces harder, etched with the lines of loss and survival. They moved with a synchronized grace that spoke of years fighting side by side. These were Nalen's sisters, Sani and Ka. Sani, the eldest, studied Elias with eyes like chips of flint. There was no mercy in that gaze, only a cold, calculating assessment of threat and value. She looked at the knife at his throat. She looked at Nalen on the travois. She looked at the bandages on her sister's leg. "Let him stand," Sani said finally. The knife withdrew. Elias slowly pushed himself to his knees, wiping blood from a cut on his neck where the blade had nicked him. He did not speak. He barely breathed. Sani walked up to him and stopped close enough that he could smell the wood smoke on her dress. She reached out and grabbed his chin, turning his face side to side like she was examining livestock at auction. "You were a scout," she said flatly. It was not a question. "I was," Elias admitted. "And now?" "Now I am just a man who wants a drink of water and a chance to explain." Sana's eyes narrowed to slits. "You brought our sister home," she said. "That is the only reason your blood is not already soaking into this ground. But do not mistake this for friendship, white man. Do not mistake survival for welcome." She gestured to the warriors. "Take his weapons, all of them. Bind his hands. The council will decide what to do with him." As rough hands stripped away his rifle, his pistol, and his knife, Elias caught Nalen's eye across the clearing. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude, perhaps. or maybe just pity. Either way, he was now a prisoner, and his life depended entirely on the mercy of people who had every reason in the world to show him none. The council met that evening beneath a limestone bluff that overhung the canyon floor. A smokeless fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the elders who sat on woven mats in a loose circle. Elias stood in the center of that circle with his hands bound behind his back. Warriors ringed the clearing, their eyes fixed on him with undisguised hostility. The chief was a man named Kokis, not the legendary warrior but a cousin who carried the name with quiet dignity. He listened as Nayland told her story, how she had been bitten while gathering roots far from camp, how Elias had found her, how he had sucked the poison from her leg and carried her back to his cabin, how he had tended her fever for 3 days. When she finished, the medicine man examined her wound. He unwrapped the bandages Elias had applied and studied the cross-shaped incisions. He smelled the healing flesh and nodded slowly. "The cutting was done well," the medicine man announced. "The poison is gone. She would have died without this white man's help." A murmur rippled through the council. Among the Apache, saving a life created a bond, a spiritual debt that could not be easily dismissed. The chief looked at Elias. "Why?" he asked. "Why save an Apache woman? Your people kill us for sport." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "I have seen enough death," he said. "I have caused enough death. When I found her dying in that wash, I did not see an Apache. I did not see an enemy. I just saw a person who needed help. Maybe I thought if I saved one life, just one, I could start to balance the scales." The chief studied him for a long time. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. "A life for a life," the chief said finally. "You have returned a daughter to us. We will give you your breath in return, but you cannot leave this canyon." Elias frowned. "Why not?" "Because you have seen this place," Sani interjected, stepping into the circle. "You know the trails. You know where the water is. If we let you go, you could sell that information to soldiers or miners or men like Harlan Pierce." Elias felt his blood chill at that name. Harlan Pierce was a rancher with a reputation for brutality, a man who believed the Arizona Territory belonged to white settlers by divine right, and that anyone else living on it was simply an obstacle to be removed. "I gave my word," Elias said. "I am done with that life." "The word of a white man is like smoke," Santa said coldly. "It drifts whichever way the wind blows. No, you stay here. You stay until we are certain you are not a danger. You stay and you work. You owe a debt to the spirits for all the blood on your hands." "What kind of work?" Elias asked. Santa pointed toward the camp, toward the water skins that needed filling, the wood that needed chopping, the horses that needed tending. "You will serve," she said. "You will labor. You will prove that you are more than just another white snake waiting to strike." Elias looked around the circle. He saw the hands resting near knife hilts. He saw the hatred barely contained behind stone faces. He saw Nellen watching him with anxious eyes. He saw no other choice. "I accept," he said. The weeks that followed were brutal. They stripped Elias of everything he had and gave him nothing in return except endless work. He slept on the bare ground near the horse corral with only a thin blanket between him and the cold desert night. He woke before dawn to haul water from the stream, the heavy buffalo bladder skins cutting into his shoulders. He chopped wood until his hands bled and blistered. He mended fences and cleaned out animal pens and did every dirty job the camp required. The warriors watched him with contemptuous amusement. The women turned their backs when he passed. The children threw stones at him and ran away laughing. Only Nayland acknowledged his existence. She was healing well, able to walk now with just a slight limp. Sometimes Elias would look up from his labors and find her watching him from across the camp. She never smiled, she never waved, but she saw him, and somehow that made the humiliation bearable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with the children. A boy of about 6 years had broken his toy bow. He sat crying near the stream, clutching the splintered wood in his small hands. Elias walked over and knelt beside him. "Let me see," he said gently. The boy recoiled at first, but Elias took a strip of wet rawhide from his pocket and wrapped it carefully around the break. As it dried, it would shrink and hold like iron. The boy watched with wide eyes. When Elias handed the repaired bow back, the child smiled, a real smile, missing 2 front teeth. Word spread quietly through the camp. The white man was good with his hands. He could fix things. A warrior named Coda was struggling with a worn saddle strap. Elias showed him how to splice in new leather without creating a pressure point that would rub the horse raw. Another warrior had a mare that was going lame. Elias examined the hoof and found an abscess forming. He showed them how to drain it and pack it with healing moss. Small things, practical things, the kind of knowledge that kept people alive in harsh country. The hostility did not disappear, but it cooled. The warriors still despised what Elias represented, but they began to respect his skills and his willingness to work without complaint. All except one. Taza was a young warrior, maybe 19 years old, with hatred burning in his eyes like unbanked coals. He had lost his father and 2 brothers to the cavalry. Every time he looked at Elias, he saw the faces of the men who had destroyed his family. 3 weeks into his captivity, Taza confronted Elias at the stream. "You poisoned the water just by standing in it," Taza snarled. Elias stepped aside. "I am just filling the skins. I will move." "You should be dead," Taza continued, his voice rising. "My brothers are dead. My father is dead. Why do you still breathe when they are buried in the ground?" He shoved Elias hard. Elias stumbled but did not fight back. He knew that striking an Apache warrior would mean instant death. "Coward!" Taza screamed. He drew his knife. "I will finish what the snake started." He lunged. Elias dodged the blade and caught Taza's wrist, using the younger man's momentum to spin him off balance. But he did not strike back. He simply held on. "Let him go." Sana's voice cracked like a whip. She stood on the bank with Ka beside her, both of them holding heavy wooden clubs. Taza struggled against Elias's grip, his face purple with rage. "He is an enemy," Taza shouted. "He is under the protection of the council," Sana said coldly. "He saved our sister. If you kill him, you insult the spirits. You dishonor Nayland. Is that what you want?" Taza stared at her for a long moment. Then he wrenched his arm free and spat at Elias's feet. "The debt will be paid someday," Taza hissed, "and then I will cut your throat and watch you bleed." He stormed off into the brush. Elias stood panting, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at Sane. "Thank you," he said. Sane's face was stone. "I did not do it for you. I did it for the law. Do not confuse the two." She turned and walked away. But something had shifted. The sisters had defended him publicly. The other warriors had seen it. And though no one spoke of it openly, Elias understood that he had taken one small step from enemy towards something else. That night, Nayland found him sitting alone by the horse corral, staring up at the stars. "You handled that well," she said quietly. "Taza wanted you to fight back. He wanted a reason to kill you." "I know," Elias said. "I have known men like him. The grief is eating him alive." Nayland sat down beside him on the fence rail. "Not too close, but close enough." "Why did you not defend yourself?" she asked. "You are bigger than him, stronger." "Because fighting him would not bring his family back," Elias said, "and because maybe I deserve some of what he feels. I did terrible things in my past. Maybe having someone hate me for them is part of paying the price." Nayland was quiet for a long time. "You are a strange man, Elias Carter," she said finally. "I know," he replied. "I am working on it." And despite everything, Nayland laughed. A small sound, barely more than a breath, but it was real. It was the first time she had laughed since the snake bite, and Elias realized with sudden, startling clarity that it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. A month passed. Then, too, Elias continued his labor in the camp, and slowly the atmosphere around him changed. The children sought him out now, bringing him broken tools and torn clothing to repair. The warriors nodded at him when they passed. Even Sanny's cold glare had warmed by a few degrees. And Nayland had become something more than the woman he had saved. She found reasons to be near him. She brought him extra food when no one was watching. She taught him words in her language, laughing gently when he mangled the pronunciation. They talked late into the evenings about their lives before. Nayland spoke of her childhood by the river, of her father, who had been a respected hunter, of her mother, who had died of fever when she was young. Elias spoke of the farm in Texas where he had grown up, of the brother who had died in the war, of the empty years after when he had wandered into the army because he had nothing else. One night, they sat together beneath a cottonwood tree while the camp slept around them. The stars blazed overhead, impossibly bright and close. "Do you ever imagine it?" Elias asked quietly. "A life without the fear, without having to look over your shoulder all the time?" Nayland considered the question. "I have never known a life like that," she admitted. "Fear is like the wind in this country. It is always there, even when you cannot feel it." "I imagine it sometimes," Elias said. "A cabin somewhere peaceful, a field of crops that does not get burned, silence that is not waiting for a gunshot." "And who lives in this cabin?" Nayland asked softly. Elias turned to look at her. The moonlight caught the planes of her face, softening the angles, illuminating the depths of her eyes. "I do not know yet," he said, "but I am starting to hope it is not just me." Nayland held his gaze. Something passed between them, an acknowledgment of feelings that neither of them was ready to name. She reached out and touched his arm, just a brush of fingers against weathered skin, but it sent electricity shooting through every nerve in his body. "We should not," she whispered. "My sisters would never understand." "I know," Elias said. "I know." But neither of them moved away. The fragile peace shattered 3 days later. It happened in the quiet of early morning. Elias was packing his bedroll when one of the young men accidentally kicked over his saddlebags. The worn leather finally gave way, spilling the contents across the dirt. Elias bent together his things: spare ammunition, a whetstone, a tobacco pouch, and a folded oilskin packet he had forgotten was there. The packet fell open, A map slid out onto the ground. It was a military map, official Army survey paper, covered in precise black lines and topographical markings. Rivers, mountains, trails, and red ink. Red ink marking troop movements. Red ink circling encampments. Red ink showing the path the cavalry had taken 5 years ago during the Salt River campaign. Elias felt his blood turn to ice. He lunged for the map, but it was too late. Nayland was standing right there. She had come to bring him breakfast. She saw the map. She picked it up. Her face drained of all color as she read the markings. Her eyes traced the red line that wound up through a box canyon and circled a location labeled Target Winter Camp. August 12, 1872. The date was burned into her memory. It was the day her father died. Her hands began to shake. "What is this?" she whispered. "Nayland?" Elias started. "What is this?" she screamed. Her eyes flew to the corner of the map where neat handwriting recorded the name of the man who had drawn it. Scout E. Carter. The world stopped spinning. Nayland looked at Elias. She looked at the man who had saved her life. The man she had been falling in love with. The man who had been sitting beside her beneath the stars talking about a peaceful future. And she saw the truth. He was the scout who had led the soldiers to her village. He was the man whose map had guided the bullets that killed her father. All this time, all those conversations, all those moments of connection. He had known. The scream that tore from her throat brought the entire camp running. Sani and Ka arrived first. They saw Nayland on her knees in the dirt, clutching a piece of paper, tears streaming down her face. They saw Elias standing frozen, his expression one of naked horror. "What happened?" Sani demanded. Nayland threw the map at Elias. It fluttered against his chest and fell to the ground. He drew it. Nayland choked out. "The map that killed our father. He drew it. He led them to our village. He showed them the path." The camp exploded. Warriors rushed forward, knives drawn. Taza was at the front, his face twisted with vindicated fury. "I knew it," Taza roared. "I knew he was a snake." Hands grabbed Elias and threw him to the ground. Boots kicked his ribs, his back, his legs. He curled into a ball and took the beating without fighting back. There was nothing he could say, nothing he could do. The map had told the truth. "Kill him," someone screamed. "Cut his heart out." Taza raised his knife for the killing stroke. "Stop." The chief's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his face grave. "Stop," he repeated. "We have spilled enough blood for one day. Tie him up. We will decide his fate when morning comes." They bound Elias to a cottonwood tree with rawhide so tight it cut off the circulation to his hands. Blood from his split lip dripped onto his chest. One eye was swelling shut, and through the haze of pain, he watched Nayland being led away by her sisters. He did not look back. Elias spent that night tied to the tree, drifting in and out of consciousness. His body throbbed with the aftermath of the beating, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the anguish in his soul. He had known, somewhere deep down, that this moment would come. He had carried that map for 5 years as a reminder of what he had done, a self-inflicted wound that he refused to let heal. And now it had destroyed everything. Toward dawn, he heard soft footsteps approaching. Sani emerged from the darkness. Ka followed close behind. Their faces were unreadable in the gray light. "You are awake," Sani said flatly. "I am," Elias croaked through cracked lips. "Good, then you can listen." She crouched down until their eyes were level. I should let Taza gut you like a deer, she said quietly. That map you drew killed our father. It killed Nalen's childhood. It turned us into orphans before we were grown. I know, Elias said. I know what I did. And yet you came here, Sani continued. You saved our sister. You worked beside us. You let my people beat you and did not fight back. Why? Because I cannot undo the past, Elias said. I can only try to be different now. Sani studied him for a long moment. There is news, she said finally. Bad news. A rancher named Harlan Pierce has sent men to survey the water sources near this canyon. He is coming to drive us out. And word has reached us that he has the ear of the army. He is telling them we are stockpiling weapons, that we are planning to attack the settlements. Pierce is a liar, Elias said. He wants your land. He wants the water. We know what he wants, Sani said. The question is what we do about it. She paused. And that is where you come in. Me? You know, Pierce. You know how white men think. You know their trails and their weaknesses. We need that knowledge. You want my help, Elias said slowly. After what you just learned about me, I want my people to survive, Sani said. I want the children in this camp to grow up. If using a white snake to fight other white snakes accomplishes that, then I will hold my nose and make the bargain. She pulled a knife from her belt. For a moment, Elias thought she was going to kill him after all. Instead, she cut the rawhide binding his hands. Pierce attacked this camp 3 days ago, Sani said, while you were tied to that tree. He came with 30 men and 4 soldiers. They burned 2 wickiups. They killed an elder named Kitchi. And they took 3 children. Elias felt his stomach drop. Children? A boy named Chavato? A teenage girl? And a baby. Sana's voice was steady, but Elias could see the rage burning behind her eyes. They took them to Pierce's ranch or to the town of Rio Verde. They will sell them or keep them as servants. That is what men like Pierce do. You want me to help get them back? Elias said. I want you to lead the rescue, Sani said. You know the country. You know the white man's world. We cannot ride into that town without starting a war that will kill everyone here. She stood up. But a small group, moving fast, led by a man who knows the trails and speaks the language, that might work. And if I die trying, then you die doing something that matters, Sani said coldly. And maybe you wash some of the red off your hands before you go. She turned and walked back toward the camp. Ka lingered for a moment. Nalen will go with you, Ka said quietly. She insisted. Havado is our cousin. Elias closed his eyes. Does she even want to look at me? She does not know what she wants, Ka admitted. But she knows those children need to come home. And she believes, somewhere underneath all that anger, that you might be the only one who can make that happen. She left him alone in the growing light of dawn. Elias sat against the tree, feeling the blood return to his numbed hands. He thought about the map. He thought about the faces of the dead he saw every time he closed his eyes. And he thought about 3 stolen children who had done nothing wrong except be born in the wrong place at the wrong time. He pushed himself to his feet. If this was how he would pay his debt, so be it. The rescue party assembled within hours. 5 people. Elias, Nalen, Taza, a solid warrior named Badal, and a young tracker named Hami. Nalen did not speak to Elias as they prepared to leave. She did not look at him. She simply checked her weapons and mounted her horse, but she was going. That had to count for something. They set out into the brutal heat of midday, riding hard to pick up the trail before it went cold. The journey nearly killed them. They rode through volcanic badlands where the rocks tore at the horses' hooves. They crossed alkali flats where the white crust blinded their eyes. They ran out of water on the second day and survived by eating the red fruit of prickly pear cactus. On the third day, a flash flood separated the group. Elias and Nayland were cut off from the others, forced to shelter in a shallow cave while walls of churning water roared past below. They huddled together in the darkness, soaked and shivering. The storm screamed outside, lightning turning the world white. "I should hate you," Nayland said suddenly. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the thunder. "I know," Elias said. "I do hate you," she continued. "When I look at that map, I see my father bleeding in the dirt. I see my childhood burning." Elias did not try to defend himself. There was no defense. "But when I look at you," Nayland whispered, "I also see the man who sucked poison from my leg, the man who gave his water to strangers, the man who took a beating rather than fight back." She turned to face him. Even in the darkness, he could feel the intensity of her gaze. "How can you be both?" she asked. "How can you be the monster and the man?" "I do not know," Elias admitted. His voice cracked. "I have asked myself that question every day for 5 years. The only answer I have found is that I am trying to be different, trying to be better, and maybe that is all any of us can do." Nayland was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she leaned against him. Her head rested on his shoulder. Her hand found his in the darkness. "I want to forgive you," she said quietly. "I am not there yet, but I want to be." Elias wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close against the cold. "That is enough for now," he said. "That is more than I deserve." They stayed like that through the long night, holding each other, while the storm raged outside. Two broken people, finding shelter in each other's arms. When morning came, they were different. Something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something that might grow into it someday. They found the others and continued toward Rio Verde. And Elias knew with absolute certainty that he would either bring those children home or die trying. There was no other option anymore. Rio Verde was a scar on the land. 2 rows of wooden buildings flanking a street of churned mud and manure. The air stank of raw lumber, stale beer, and unwashed bodies. They left the horses hidden in a dry wash outside town. Elias and Nayland would go in on foot. Taza and Bedal would wait near the livery stable where the children were likely being held. When the time came, they would strike fast. The plan was simple, and almost certainly suicidal. Elias would walk into the saloon and confront Harlan Pierce directly. He would make a scene big enough to draw every gun in town to one spot. While they were focused on him, the others would grab the children and run. "You are going to die," Nayland said flatly as they crouched behind a water trough studying the street. "Probably," Elias agreed. "Then why do it?" "Because those children deserve to go home," Elias said. "And because maybe dying for something right is better than living with what I have done." Nayland grabbed his arm. Her grip was fierce, almost painful. "Come back to me," she said. Her voice broke on the words. "Do not you dare die in that saloon, Elias Carter. Not when I am finally ready to forgive you." Elias looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the love she was not quite ready to admit. He leaned forward and kissed her, just once, soft and aching and filled with everything they had not had time to say. "I will try," he promised. "I will try my best." Then he stood up and walked toward the saloon. The swinging doors creaked as Elias pushed through them. The room inside was dim and smoky, crowded with rough men drinking their pay. At the far end, sitting at a corner table with a bottle of whiskey and a smug expression, was Harlan Pierce. The rancher was big as a barn door, wearing a suit that cost more than most men earned in a year. Elias walked to the center of the room and stopped. "Harlan," he called out. The piano player stopped mid-chord. Every head in the room turned. Pierce squinted through the smoke. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well now," he drawled, "if it is not the squaw lover, I thought my boys left you for the vultures back at that canyon." "They missed," Elias said. Pierce laughed. He leaned back in his chair, hooking his thumbs in his vest. "You came a long way to die, Carter. What brings you to my town?" "I came to tell you something, Harlan. Something every man in this room needs to hear." Elias raised his voice, letting it carry to every corner. "I was a scout for the 3rd Cavalry. I rode for Crook and Miles. I tracked men who were fighting for their homeland, but I never once rode for a child thief." A murmur went through the room. "Watch your mouth," Pierce growled. His smile vanished. "I see you," Elias continued, looking around at the assembled men. "All of you, you call yourselves pioneers, settlers, civilized men, but you ride into peaceful camps with 30 guns and steal babies. You lock little boys in horse stalls. That is not settling the frontier. That is cowardice of the worst kind." Pierce stood up, his face purple with rage. "That is enough," he snarled. "Cut him down." A man at the bar reached for his pistol. Elias drew faster. The gun in his hand was an old Navy Colt that Taza had given him. 5 shots. He made the first one count, putting a bullet through the whiskey bottle on Pierce's table and showering the rancher with glass and liquor. "Come on, then," Elias roared. "Come and get me." The room erupted in chaos. Men dove for cover. Tables overturned. Guns blazed from every direction. Elias ducked behind a support beam, firing to suppress rather than kill. He needed to keep their attention. He needed to give the others time. Outside, in the darkness, Taza and Bedal sprinted for the livery stable. Elias took a bullet grazed to his arm, then one to his thigh. He kept shooting until the gun clicked empty. The stable's on fire. Someone outside screamed. "They got the children." That was the signal. Elias threw himself through a side window, crashing into the alley in a shower of glass. He stumbled to his feet, putting weight on his wounded leg, and limped toward the street. He saw them, shadows moving fast. Taza carrying a crying child, Bedal herding 2 more, Nayland bringing up the rear with the teenage girl. They were clear, but Pierce's men were pouring out of the saloon, guns drawn, screaming for blood. Elias stepped into the middle of the street. He stood directly between the mob and the fleeing Apache. "Over here," he shouted, waving his arms. "Look at me!" 20 guns turned in his direction. "Run!" Elias screamed without looking back. "Nayland, run!" He saw her stop. He saw her turn toward him, her face a mask of anguish. "Go!" he roared. And then the guns opened fire. Elias felt the hammer blows hit him, shoulder, ribs, leg. He spun and fell, his face hitting the dirt. He lay on his back, staring up at the stars. They looked cold and very far away, but through the ringing in his ears he heard something beautiful. Hoof beats, fading into the distance. They made it, he thought. The children are safe. Harlan Pierce stood over him, a smoking pistol in his hand. "You son of a bitch," Pierce snarled. Elias looked up at him and smiled. "I quit," he whispered. Pierce raised his gun for the killing shot. A rifle cracked from somewhere in the darkness. Pierce's hat flew off his head. He ducked, cursing, suddenly aware that he was exposed in the open street. "They are in the rocks," someone yelled. "Take cover." The mob scattered, fearing an ambush, and Elias lay in the blood-soaked dirt, the sounds of the world fading to a dull roar. He had done it. He had paid the debt. Darkness rushed in from the edges of his vision, soft and welcoming. The last thing he saw before it claimed him was the face of the woman he loved, riding hard toward the mountains with 3 children behind her. Safe. That was enough. 4 days passed. Nayland sat by the entrance to the canyon every morning at dawn, watching the empty trail. Her sisters begged her to rest. The medicine man said she was making herself sick, but she could not stop looking. On the 4th afternoon, a figure appeared in the shimmering heat haze at the mouth of the canyon. It was not walking. It was stumbling, lurching forward a few steps, falling, then pushing itself back up with terrible determination. Nayland was running before she even consciously realized what she was seeing. She found Elias Carter collapsed in the dirt, 50 yards from the tree line. His clothes were stiff with dried blood. His face was sunburned raw. His lips were cracked white, but he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. "Elias," she screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. His eyes flickered open, glassy, fever bright, but they found her face. "I promised," he croaked. "I promised I would try." Then he passed out. They carried him to the medicine man's wickiup. The healer cut away his ruined clothes and examined the wounds beneath. 3 bullets had hit him. One had gone clean through his shoulder. One had cracked a rib. The 3rd was still lodged in his thigh, festering with infection. For 2 days and 2 nights, Elias burned with fever. He thrashed and moaned, fighting battles in his sleep, calling out to people who were not there, and Nayland never left his side. She bathed his forehead with cool water. She dripped broth between his cracked lips. She held his hand through the darkest hours of the night and whispered to him in her own language, words of comfort, words of encouragement, words of love. On the morning of the 3rd day, the fever broke. Elias opened his eyes. They were clear for the first time in a week. He saw the woven ceiling of the wickiup above him. He felt the soft fur of a buffalo robe beneath him. And he saw Nayland sitting beside the bed, her head nodding with exhaustion, dark circles beneath her beautiful eyes. "You stayed," he whispered. Nayland's head jerked up. She stared at him for a moment like she could not believe he was real. Then she burst into tears. "You are alive," she sobbed, throwing herself onto his chest, clinging to him. "You stubborn fool. You impossible man. You are alive." "I told you I would try," Elias said weakly. He wrapped his good arm around her, holding her close. "I keep my promises." Nayland sat up and wiped her face. "You walked 40 miles with bullets in you," she said. "The medicine man says no white man has ever survived something like that." "I had a reason to survive," Elias said simply. "I had you." Nayland looked at him, really looked at him, at the scars old and new, at the gray in his hair that had not been there a month ago, at the eyes that had seen too much and lost too much and somehow still held hope. "I forgive you," she said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, simple, profound, life-changing. Elias felt something crack open in his chest, a wall he had been building around his heart for 5 years. "You do not have to," he said. "I know what I did." "I know what you did too," Nayland said. "And I know what you have done since. The first does not erase the second, but neither does the second erase the first. They are both true. They are both you." She took his face in her hands. "I choose to see the man who saved my life," she said. "I choose to see the man who took bullets so children could escape. I choose to see the man who crawled across a desert to keep a promise." She leaned forward and kissed him. Gentle, reverent, full of everything they had survived to reach this moment. "I love you, Elias Carter," she whispered against his lips, "ghosts and all." "I love you too," Elias breathed, "more than I have ever loved anything." Outside the wickiup, the sun was rising over the canyon walls. The cottonwood leaves shimmered gold in the morning light. Children's laughter echoed off the cliffs. And for the first time and longer than he could remember, Elias Carter felt something he had almost forgotten existed: peace. The wedding happened on a clear autumn night beneath a sky blazing with stars. The whole camp gathered by the central fire. The elders sat on woven mats. The warriors stood in a loose circle. The children sat cross-legged in the front, eyes wide with wonder. Elias stood beside the fire wearing a new shirt of soft deerskin that the women had made for him. His wounds had healed, leaving fresh scars to join the old ones. But he stood straight and tall, his eyes fixed on the path leading to the wickiups. Then she appeared. Nayland walked toward him through the firelight, and Elias forgot how to breathe. She wore a dress of white buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, adorned with wild flowers from the canyon. She moved without her cane, without her limp, head held high. She had never looked more beautiful. Santa and Ka walked on either side of her. Their faces were solemn, but Elias thought he saw something that might have been approval in Santa's eyes. The medicine man stepped forward as Nayland reached the fire. He carried a braided cord of leather and yucca fiber. "Join hands," the medicine man instructed. Nayland placed her left hand in Elias's right. Her skin was warm. Her grip was strong. The medicine man wrapped the cord around their joined hands, binding them together. "Before the spirits of the mountains," he intoned, "before the wind and the water and the fire, before the ancestors who watch over us, I bind these two souls together." He looked at Elias. "You come to us as a stranger," he said. "You came carrying ghosts and guilt, but you have bled with us. You have suffered with us. You have proven that the man you are is not the man you were." He looked at Nayland. "And you come to him carrying scars of your own, the weight of loss and the fire of anger. But you have chosen to see beyond the past. You have chosen love over hate." The medicine man raised their bound hands for everyone to see. "Let no one break what the spirits have joined," he declared. "Let no enemy come between them. Let them walk side by side through all the days that remain." Children ran forward, scattering dried flower petals and kernels of yellow corn at their feet. The drums began to beat, a steady heartbeat rhythm that echoed off the canyon walls. Elias turned to Nayland. His eyes were wet with tears he did not try to hide. "I do not deserve you," he said. "You are right," Nayland agreed. "But I am going to keep you anyway." She pulled him close and kissed him in front of everyone. The camp erupted in cheers and laughter and the pounding of drums. That night, they danced around the fire until the stars began to fade. They ate and drank and celebrated being alive. And when the morning came, Elias Carter woke up next to his wife in a small wickiup near the stream. She was still asleep, her face peaceful in the dawn light. He lay there for a long time, just watching her breathe. He thought about the road that had brought him here, the violence, the guilt, the years of wandering alone, the woman dying in a wash, the choice to help her instead of walking away. If he had made any different decision at any point along the way, he would not be here now. Maybe that was what redemption was, he thought. Not erasing the past, not pretending it did not happen, just making different choices today and tomorrow. And every day after that, Nayland stirred and opened her eyes. "Good morning, husband," she murmured. "Good morning, wife," Elias replied. She smiled and reached for him. Outside, the sun rose over the Dragoon Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The cottonwood leaves danced in the morning breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called out, riding the thermals high above the canyon. Months later, Elias sat on the porch of the small cabin they had built near the bend in the stream. He was mending a bridle, his hands moving with practiced ease. The autumn air was crisp and clean. Nayland sat beside him, sewing a new shirt for the baby that would come in the spring. Her belly was just beginning to show beneath her dress. In the creek below, children splashed and played. Shavada was there, teaching the younger ones how to catch crawfish. A plume of dust appeared on the horizon. Elias tensed, his hand moving toward the rifle that leaned against the porch rail. But Nayland placed her hand on his arm. "They are just passing," she said quietly. "They always do." Elias watched the distant riders disappear over the ridge. Army patrol, most likely, or perhaps miners heading for the mountains. They did not come this way anymore. The canyon had become a place that white men avoided. The stories kept them away. Stories of ghosts and warriors and a white scout who had betrayed his own kind. Let them tell their stories, Elias thought. The truth was simpler and harder than any story. The truth was that a man could change. The truth was that love could grow in the most unlikely places. The truth was that home was not a location but a choice. A choice you made every single day to be better than you were yesterday. The sun began to set, painting the sky in violent purples and burning oranges. Nayland leaned her head against Elias's shoulder. He put his arm around her and pulled her close. "We are home," he said quietly. "Yes," Nayland agreed. "We are home." And in that small cabin by the stream, in a canyon that had witnessed so much pain and so much healing, a family grew. A family born of violence and redemption, of hatred transformed into love, of two broken people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. The ghost still came sometimes. Late at night, when the wind howled through the canyon, Elias would wake in a cold sweat, reaching for a rifle that was no longer there. But then he would feel Nayland's hand on his chest, her voice murmuring comfort in the darkness, and the ghost would fade. Because the thing about ghosts is that they only have power over people who are alone. And Elias Carter was not alone anymore. He was home. The end. Author note. Thank you for listening to this story of Elias and Nayland. It was a tale about the weight of the past and the possibility of redemption, about the courage it takes to change and the love that makes change worthwhile. I would love to hear where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below with your location. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more tales of the frontier. Stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Stories about love that defies the odds. Stories about second chances and the strength of the human spirit. Until next time, safe travels to you all. And remember, no matter what you have done, no matter how heavy your burden feels, it is never too late to choose a different path. It is never too late to find your way home. Word count, approximately 14,800 words.